I feel like that pause for bringing the chairs on was needed. Brian, just incredible story, and yeah, thank you. Lucy's already said it, but thank you so much for sharing that with us and being here and sharing even more. So I'm going to go along the panel and let everyone else introduce themselves, and then we'll come back to Brian.
Okay.
Go for it.
Shall I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Hi everyone. I'm Colin Kennedy. I'm a father, a husband, a skateboarder, ex-professional skateboarder. I have a professional role at Nike SB, which gives me the pleasure of working with skateboarders, my community, for across all countries, generations, etc. So, and I get the pleasure of being able to spend time with this guy Brian Anderson quite often as well. More recently in the last 6 months actually. So yeah, that's me. Happy to be here and really honoured to be asked by the Ben Raemers Foundation to participate in this. So I hope you enjoyed the films. I thought it was really moving, and yeah, I'm very proud of Brian and the way he opens himself up. So yeah, have a great evening. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Hi, I'm Chloe Beale. I am a doctor, a consultant psychiatrist. I have never so much as put one foot on a skateboard in my life, so I'm in like a bit of a fish out of water. But yeah, I'm a consultant psychiatrist. My work involves quite a lot of working with patients who are suicidal. I'm also suicide prevention lead for the NHS organisation that I work for, and I do a bit of work with suicide charities, which is, I think, how I ended up being sort of found and invited to do this. So I'm very grateful and hope that I have something of use to contribute.
Brian, you just saw me up there, and I'm regular footed.
I'm regular footed as well, actually.
Oh, really? Can you skate switch? That was a skateboard corny joke.
I'm a skater. My name's Dave Noble. It's an honour to be here. Thank you. Thanks, Brian, for the film. It's incredible. Fred. Yeah, I work in the wellbeing space, mental health. I'm a coach, amongst other things. I work doing mentoring for a lot of young people going up to adults, and I'm a reformed hellraiser.
Also, Fred's obviously not here, but I think just a thank to him as well, the same as we thank Brian, of sharing his story and what he's brought to this evening as well. So thank you, Fred. So we're obviously going to go to Brian first, but just to sort of kick it off, really, what are your initial thoughts and feeling after now seeing your story sort of on the screen and out there to everyone?
Well, first of all, thanks everybody for being here. Of course, it's strange to see yourself tell a story, but I guess what I've been saying a lot, and I really believe in, is that just sharing your story with the world in this way just promotes people to share their stories with one another. So it just felt reassuring. Like, that's why I did it, to share so other people can share. Because sometimes you feel self-conscious, or you're talking about yourself a few different times over the years. Am I being repetitive? But no, I know that people benefit from everyone in this room sharing space and stories and time. So all the sharing is going to do is help people. So it felt good in that regard. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to throw it back over to you, Colin. But obviously you're in this space and you work with skaters of all different ages and everything. So was there anything in the film, either from Brian or Fred's, that really stood out for you, and what you've seen, or perhaps something that actually you hadn't seen before that's come to your sort of mind?
Well, particularly in Fred's case, his movie, I mean, it's obviously shocking to know what he's gone through, you know, and the fact, I think more than, it's so stark that, you know, the perception of Fred was that he was enjoying life, and when clearly he was going through a period of really dark times. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that. What's under the surface is really what is important that we need to recognize, you know, inside of our community, because skateboarding is a space where a lot of things are normalized. The parameters are very different from life, like normal life. A lot of us can see it as a form of escapism. So I think seeing Fred being so frank, it really, you know, and having some tragic circumstances in his life, you know, someone at the top of what we consider a legend in the game, that, you know, to be suffering such things, and who knows, you know, and that's just someone that's a professional skateboarder, you know, that is maybe celebrated and known, you know, across your whole community and your local spot. There's probably, you know, a percentage of that community that's going through similar things, and I guess this is the thing, and reinforces the importance of sharing, talking, listening. So yeah, incredible. And yeah, just I absolutely love the metaphor that Brian mentioned about the particularly in you coming out, and the black box metaphor is just absolutely poetic, to be honest. And you couldn't have said it. I think you're a poet in the way you speak generally, but yeah, but just incredibly moving. You know, under the surface of the party lifestyle, but generally of skateboarding, I think there's a lot of dark stuff, and you know, I think what you guys are doing with the foundation is incredible, and opening up these conversations. So, sorry, long-winded answer, but why not?
No, thank you. And I think that's one of the key themes that really came out in sort of Brian, your film as well, and Fred's, that like escapism and party sort of scene of skating that's just, it sounds like it's just part of your everyday, and it was what you know from the moment you start. And I suppose it was just, you touched on it in your film, but when was that sort of like pivotal moment of I'm done with escapism?
That, like I said, happened last year, before the day I stopped drinking. I was actually not intoxicated, and I was lying in bed, and I could feel a lot of pain from time to time, actual pain, like where probably your liver is. And I laid there in bed and just apologized to my body, and also said thank you for jumping downstairs. And it's a little funny, but I was really being very serious and saying thank you, and thank you for putting up with all I put in you. You know, I really was just going through this little, this like 10-minute, you know, discussion with my organs, my lungs, everything, you know, my bones, and I just really thought of myself as this body and this, you know, this shell, and so I was like, this is terrible, you know. I've lived this long and seen the world, and I want to still skate, and I care about my family, my siblings, my friends, myself, my husband, everybody, you know. And but I guess I said it almost right there backwards, but I wasn't caring about myself in a lot of ways. So as I said about the amount I was drinking, I knew, you know, I had tried before, and every time I stopped drinking and thought I could have a glass of wine with dinner a week later, it would be, you know, 10, 15 drinks a day. And a lot of times you're skating and sweating it out. And so, but I just knew, I was like, this isn't fair to this body. I think you're given like one life. There's other possibilities, but it was just like, this is enough. You know, this is not the right thing to do this to a precious body. And so, stop.
Thank you. And Dave, I suppose like a different angle here. Obviously, Brian's talking from his experience of being a pro, but and I don't mean to say this like generic, because I know everyone, skating's a hobby for a lot of you, but almost to flip it on the other side, if you're not a pro, what stood out for you, or what resonated in sort of day-to-day skating and what you get from it versus any challenges that you saw in the film as well?
Well, as a skater, I found skating from a young age, and I found like it was my companion. Escapism, a way to express what I couldn't articulate through my mouth. It was like my best friend. It was reliable. What I also recognised from a very young age was that I would bleed, and that was quite cool. The art of self-harm, I naturally kind of gravitated to it, like, you know, snapping bones was something that to some people is an inconvenience, and to me, I found it weirdly okay. So that's quite disturbing to sort of connect to that. And still to this day, and I snapped my wrist last year, so skating. So I haven't really changed much there, but with my own experience, I really relate to your story and Fred's. I mean, Fred's like another level of trauma that he went through. I mean, everyone's trauma is significant and relevant, but I was just really inspired by that and moved, because it really touched me because of my own, you know, pain that I've been through, and escapism through skateboarding and what that can give you. I also found that in you know, mind-altering substances, namely alcohol, you know, and a bunch of other drugs. So yeah, there's just so much in the films. I mean, it's just where to begin. You know?
Thank you. No, definitely. And I suppose from my own like personal reflection from these two films is, like, Brian, you touched on it about that grief of suicide and sort of your thinking around, you know, why you wouldn't take your life. And I think what's really important with these films is, although suicide isn't like the key topic, it's everything that's sort of spoken about and sort of that can be involved with that sort of suicidal thoughts and that behaviour of impulsivity and things, which in sort of looking at the skateboarding world, that's something that skaters like. It's that impulse, it's that skating, it's the tricks, it's that party sort of culture. So I think for Chloe, it'd just be really interesting to hear sort of your views on, from your background and what you work in, but almost the link to suicide from these films, but how actually it's bringing it to life that maybe some of us it's not as obvious to see from those films. Would be really interesting to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. I think in some ways, I mean, when we sort of spoke before, I said I'm quite relieved that it's not, that the entire focus of what we're talking about here is not about suicide, because what I get asked a lot when I'm asked to give talks or asked to speak to people outside my profession, it's quite often, how do we spot the signs of someone being suicidal? How do we stop people ending their lives? How do we do that? And actually there's no easy answer to that. And in fact, the answer a lot of the time is you can't know, because it's such a, in the scheme of things, it's such a rare event, and there's so many people who have suicidal thoughts, who have risk factors for suicide, and even a tiny proportion of them will die by suicide, and it's impossible to know who's going to be that person or why it's that person, and also what keeps everybody else alive, what keeps all of the other people going who don't do that. And there is no formula, there is no prediction scale. You know, my own profession has worked very hard at risk prediction scales and concluded that they do not work. You can't do it. But what you can do is know what sort of things are relevant, and not focus on suicide as being the thing that you need to zero in on and the thing that you need to spot, because it's all of the other things around it. And actually that's why talking about alcohol and addiction is so important, because something like 2/3 of people who die by suicide, alcohol is a factor. It's a hugely important factor, addiction, and particularly alcohol. And you can see why it's got all of the things that you would expect. Alcohol makes you miserable in the long run. You know, it might feel like it in the short term that it's not, but it does. It's a depressant. It also makes you impulsive. it makes you a little bit braver in the moment. It disinhibits you, so it makes it easier to do something and to act in a way that you might not do if you were sober. So it sort of adds to that perfect storm. And it also alienates people. It alienates people around you and disrupts that support network that you might have otherwise had. And there's so many other things that, you know, that have come up here and that we're talking about. I think that sort of sense of alienation and people not realizing how miserable you might feel. I think there's just so much that's important to think about. Sort of suicide occurs, usually it's to do with the transition, and that usually involves some kind of loss and then an adjustment to that loss. And a loss is not necessarily, sometimes it's something that you would traditionally think of as a loss, something tangible like a bereavement, and again, bereavement by suicide is very, very important, and for some people that might be the thing that, as you said, means that holds you back from doing it yourself. But actually it's another really important risk factor in people who die by suicide. It's more likely if you've been bereaved by suicide, so that's a really important thing to be talking about and how that affects people. So a loss can be something obvious like a bereavement, a job loss, a relationship ending, but also it can be the loss of a role, a change of role, something that we don't obviously associate with loss. So, moving from pro skating to not pro skating, or moving from full-time education to work, or just becoming a parent, being an adult and having your kids leaving home, all these sorts of things which are just normal life transitions. But for some reason, some people might struggle with that adjustment, and that's where that kind of risk occurs. So I think those sort of change points in people's lives are the things to be really mindful of, and are really, really important. It's thinking about people's roles and their identity and how that's affecting them. And I think that's something that we can all relate to and all think of that we've seen in people. But I don't know, I feel like I've rambled a little bit. I hope that's answered the question in some way.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I think everyone can relate to that. It's pros, non-pros, and it's in our everyday lives as well, and sort of almost not overlooking that as significant enough that actually it can have huge impacts and things. One thing you mentioned there is that sort of transition from non-pro to pro, and then I suppose pro back to normal life. And sort of Brian and Colin, I just thought touch on that with you guys a bit more, and sort of your experience, and also maybe what else do you think needs to happen that could help people in those transitions from when you start as just a normal kid skating, all of a sudden you become a pro, and then actually when you then go back to being that normal person again. To either of you really on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe speak to it a little bit because I've actually, it happened to me myself. I was a pro, and I had to transition into normal life, but I kind of prepared for it. We were about to have our first daughter, and I knew that this was not forever. I got into skateboarding because I was obsessed with it, and I knew I was kind of steering off the path of just conventional life, although my parents wanted otherwise for me to academically achieve and such like. But I was adamant that I was going down this path, and to some extent I had some success with it. But the transition was, you're kind of at, you get to that point and you're kind of at a loss, because that's literally everything you do. That's your world, that's your community. You're known for what you do on the skateboard. Of course, from your, I was fortunate to have a great friendships around me back home in Scotland, still do, thankfully. But, at the end of the day, you look at your friends and they've maybe taken the perhaps way more difficult part in life, educational or work or whatever, whereas I was going for the, path of least resistance, trying to do what I love. And sure, I worked at it to get there, but that period of change and acceptance that this is going to, end, and I have to find a way to still live, financially as well. And I've got I'm about to have a family. Was really difficult, and you go through some times, but at the same time, I knew that I made that choice, and I had to somehow prepare for it, and it took a long time, but I managed to transition into another line of work, but still within the skateboarding community. So, and I am in the position now where we do have to have conversations with people that you need to transition from that pro-life, and it's very difficult, but I feel like with my experience we hope that we can have conversations preemptively as opposed to people basically falling off a cliff. I think Fred described it in the best way, that he was at a loss at that moment, like what's he going to do? He doesn't know anything else, like what does he do? So I think I feel I try my best to do that. We end up with, in my job, like essentially business relationship contracts, but you have like a underlying actual personal relationship with people. So it's difficult, but at the same time, I think again it's just comes back to of having that earlier conversation instead of leaving things to the end till someone's literally going to financially fall off a cliff, and who knows from a personal point of view, where they are as well. So not the easiest part of it, but I think Brian, you want to speak on that at all? Or?
Sure. Well, personally, I mean, I was turning 45 before I'm 46 this year, and I was thinking about my skateboarding career, and I knew I still wanted to skate. In my head, I told myself I want to be pro till I'm 50, but I have a lot of other interests that are, genuine, and things that I'm going after in design and art, photography, writing. But that was a big part of wanting to stop drinking. I was like, knowing that I wanted to have a discussion with Nike and ask to renew my contract, and I wouldn't be able to skate if I was going to continue to put those poisons in my body, and so that's where I'm at now. I had lost some weight, from the alcohol bloat, like my neck, and I was just thicker everywhere, and I was happy to have a discussion with Nike and have a new contract for a few more years. We've been working together for almost 20 years. So I also wanted to show them and myself and my other skateboard sponsors that, I'm taking this seriously still, and I'm fortunate to have all these other interests. A lot of people didn't have anything else, like Fred. So that was another aspect. That was another part of the equation that was like snapped me out of that cycle. I was lucky that I didn't find hard drugs that were more incapacitating than the alcohol, and I was lucky that I ate fairly healthy and things like this. But yeah, I thought this has to stop because I'm really passionate and I care about skateboarding, the industry, and my career, and everybody that's helped me. So let's just start there, so I can just be pure. And so this is like, I've done all this skateboarding that I'm really proud of, and it's great to feel better and think about what I'm going to do when I'm 50 in 4 years, but also skate really hard and work on actually skateboarding and do art and all the arts on the side. So I'm lucky that I grabbed myself at that time and was like, I want to skate. I don't want to disappear into the bottle, and then I have other things I'm interested in life. But, so that's where I'll add to that quickly that that's the good part of the internet. There's a lot of things that people can watch and warnings and things. Where in the late '90s when I turned pro, there was not all of these resources online that you could go and find other examples and stories from to set yourself up to not set yourself up for failure. So that's a great thing that people have a lot more stories out there. So. that's a bit about of where I'm at with it all. Does that
Amazing.
sound okay?
Yeah. And just from a personal level, but I remember one of my last conversations with Ben was around how he was trying to find another job and he wanted a routine and stuff like that. So it's that resonate hearing like your story and how actually you've done that bit, and hearing sort of Ben's story from before, you can see how much that must be such a pressure for pros to then almost be spat out into this world. And what do you do then? Or when all your other mates as well are doing, like you said, Colin, a different path. So I think it's just so amazing, that awareness piece that you and Fred have brought in your films, that I think everyone can sort of learn from as well, and think about as well what that pressure is for a pro. We're going to open it up to you guys in a minute, but there's just, I suppose, just one more question for like maybe Chloe and Dave, is that I know there's not a right answer and it's hard to, but how do you actually get to that place where both for your friends and your loved ones, but also yourself, of like spot that sign that you're not okay? And like Fred and Brian both say at the end, like just reach out for help. But like not how do you do that, but any sort of share or like experience that you've got, I think for everyone that can benefit from, even if it's not now in their lives, but conversation with a friend, or even having a chat with themselves of like, how am I right now? Anything that you can share with the audience for that, and then we'll open it up to everyone else.
I'll go first. Oh my God, it's like no pressure. Okay, so I have to talk from my own experience. Because for me, I suffered in silence. So I just, like I said earlier, I didn't really know how to articulate, like communicate what was actually going on inside of me. So I just didn't. And it just always came out, sideways. It just didn't really get me anywhere in life. So for me, it was fundamental. The most significant part of me making a significant change in my mindset was to just find just that one person. I just needed one person. I think you said it in the film. Someone said it in the film that, it's just one person to get real with. And I had that one person. It was someone I kind of felt like he gave me hope. And I think that was mentioned also earlier about, I think storytelling is probably the most powerful form of giving people that message of hope. And that I've certainly connected to it tonight on the films. So that's how it happened for me. Someone shared their experience with me. It was like a story, and it kind of just connected on a level that it just, the light went on. And I think it's like a switch. It was just like, it was that moment. I had a window, and I had lots of those windows of opportunity, maybe. But I think I was at a point in my life where I was just, that classic rock bottom of like, I don't want to go on anymore like this. I've got to change it. So for me, I would say, if you recognise in someone else what we're talking about, that they're struggling, maybe just sharing something that you feel might give them that hope is worth a shot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think probably most of what I would draw on to answer that would be personal experience more than professional experience, because speaking professionally, it's just, people are so different from each other, and it's so difficult to sort of give you a blueprint or say what to look out for, because it will completely depend on that person. So I would say that trust your instincts. When there's somebody that you know that person, someone you care about, someone you love, when they're not right, they're not themselves. And I think what's really important is just saying something, and we all hold ourselves back. We all do this. We don't say something because we're worried about pissing somebody off or getting it wrong. You are not going to kill somebody by annoying them and asking them a question they don't want to answer. You're also not going to give them ideas. So you don't have to go around sort of saying to somebody, "Are you feeling suicidal?" But even if you do, even if you're that worried about someone and you ask them that question, you are not going to give somebody ideas. That does not happen. And that's something that people worry about. Like, they think if I ask the question, if I say that, might somebody who hasn't been thinking about it go, well, that's an idea. But that does not happen. You are not going to make somebody do that by asking a question. And yeah, you might annoy somebody. They might not want to answer it. They might not be ready to talk. But if you've got someone in your life, you know when something's not right. You know when they're not themselves. But we're always like, oh, is it the right time? Maybe I shouldn't. Or I'll wait till I'm more sure. Or I'll speak to some other people and see what they think. Or, you know, I just ask. Just sort of say, look, you just don't seem yourself at the moment. And they might not be ready. They might not be ready to hear it, but somewhere in there they will remember that you've noticed, and they will hold on to that, and you can come back to it. You can keep coming back to it. Don't go, oh, they said I'm fine, so, you know, so I won't ask again. Just, you know, I think you can quietly plug away at people, and it's not rocket science, and it's not life-saving advice, but I think we spend too much time worrying about saying the wrong thing or whether we should say something. So yeah, I can't tell you about signs to look out for because it depends on the person who you're looking out for signs, and it depends on what you know about them. But listen to your gut, and you know when somebody that you care about isn't right. And I think on the other side, I think when you know it's right to ask for help, I think, you know, I get slightly tired of the sort of, you know, reach out advice, because actually, I mean, yeah, obviously do, but also I know that a lot of the time people won't, and a lot of the time it really is that person reaching in and saying, look, you're not right, you're not yourself. And I know from my own experience, because I'm a professional, but I'm also a patient, I've also had mental health problems, and for me, I was not going to say anything to anybody until they noticed. And it took for me, you know, lots of people would say, are you all right? And I say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm just tired, I need a holiday. And they go, oh, fine then. And it took, you know, a friend had to take me aside at work and sit me down and say, you are not all right, and I'm not going to let you tell me that you're all right. And it's such a fucking relief when that happens. And then, as you talked about, the floodgates kind of open. Like when you've told one person, it's like it actually becomes like, okay, yeah, this is cool. Well, maybe not cool, but you know, this is actually all right. And I also don't want to be flippant, because of course we all know that mental illness is stigmatized, and you might not always get great responses and people going, oh wow, this is amazing, like coming out. You know, we all want to share really positive coming out stories, and I found yours incredibly touching, and I've got mine as well. But we've also got that experience of stigma, and it doesn't always go great. And you know, I'm sure, again, that's another thing that was really important from the films, is actually, again, increased rates of self-harm and suicide within the LGBTQ community, and things like toxic masculinity in certain communities are really important. So we like to share all these sort of positive stories of coming out, whether that's about being gay or having an illness or whatever, but it's not necessarily going to be positive every time. But I think picking the right people, and someone coming to you and saying you're not okay and you need to stop pretending you're okay, you know, I can't tell you that's going to be the thing that changes that person's life, or it's always going to go well, but you're probably not going to make it any worse.
Yeah, and I think it's that, just the other thing I would add is, like, you don't feel like you need to fix that person. You're not the fixer. You just doing those things that, like Dave and Chloe just said, that's the first bit and the most important part. There's professionals out there and others that can fix. So I think that's sometimes can be one of the hardest things in those difficult conversations. You think you need to be able to fix and have all the answers there, but you don't need to at all. Thank you so much. I mean, we're going to carry on talking with everyone else, but does anyone have any questions for these guys? Anything we've touched on, or anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to ask?
Oh, hello. I'd like to get your views on the role of the sponsors in all of this. And obviously there's like an employee-employer relationship, and there's a duty of care there. And given there's so much more money in the industry, whether there's kind of a capacity or space for someone within these brands to kind of take wellness into consideration?
I guess that's for me. Great question. And I was just about to jump in on what the guys were just talking about when, for example, we have relationships with riders and they're going through difficult circumstances. I've often been in situations where I feel very much out of my depth. But of course, perhaps if someone's going through a difficult time, they perhaps will reach out to me because maybe they don't have anyone in their, a confidant in their community perhaps. And I have, and this is probably why, I wanted to participate in this as well, because I need to learn as well. But as far as well-being, it's a huge concern for, athletes, as you call it, or whatever, is to, serve them in a different way. So yeah, it's something of concern for sure, and I think certainly in this space, and I think you can parallel in other sports as well. There's rugby players that have head trauma and they have to stop, and they're left to basically, I think you have, like you say, a duty of care to that, so upholding a personal relationship and personal care for something is very important, and within the parameters of time that I have, I try my best to do that, but often you do feel out of your depth, but we do have resources and we try to connect people in the best way, if that answers the question. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just expand on that question?
Yeah, of course.
So I don't know skateboarding at all. Although, unlike Chloe, I once put a foot on the skateboard, but I got scared, so never did it.
It's normal. I was scared the first time.
I know football and I know some other sports, like you referenced. But I know in those sports you get long-term contracts. I don't know what it's like in skateboarding world, and in football there's more about aftercare and education to try and set people up, especially younger footballers, because they may not make it. In skateboarding, what is it like, and what should be done, and what is happening? And it's actually more of a question for other people on the panel, because it sounds like.
Well, I can to that question. I turned professional in 1998, I think, and it was a lot less money than is involved in the skateboard industry now, and there was no contract. I never signed a contract. My skateboard company was the first sponsor I had. It was like $750 a month to be pro, and then if you were fortunate enough to get a wheel sponsor that made an okay amount of money, maybe you'd get $250 from the wheels. And sneakers you didn't get so much as you do now. Now the sneakers would be like your bread and butter, and your skateboard sponsor, you don't get as much money every month. So I came from that time where it was a handshake and looking someone in the eye, and you being very young and just being totally into that. I was lucky to have had an interest in culinary and was almost going to culinary school, so I had a lot of jobs ever since I was 14. So I had my own perspective. Also, like, everybody's different, speaking about the other part of the struggle of life. But I think that's starting to change now, and people hearing like stories about football and American football and people blowing out their knee, and it's just, they bought one mansion and they bought something for their mother and they have nothing. So the skateboard distribution that I skate for is called Deluxe, and the main person who runs it, Jim Thiebaud, in the last 5 years has been doing a lot of work to educate new pro skaters and to make sure that they have like a good accountant and just basic things that weren't taught to us in the late '90s when I became pro. I was lucky to have a good mentor, this guy Ed Templeton, and he was, you know, he told me to be careful with money and start like a 401k in America, but you know, we still lived check to check. Oftentimes, it was very rock and roll, you know, like music in the '80s, and so I think now that there's more money with these sugar water drinks and sponsors that people have, you know. Excuse me, that's my opinion. But people are making much more money in the industry than there were, and I think there are a lot more people that have managers that didn't exist in the late '90s, early 2000s. So it's really cool to see a lot of young skaters having people protecting them more and giving them a lot more information on how to save and think about their future. So it's starting. You know? So I've definitely seen a change in the last 5-10 years. So it's good to see compared.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Touching on what you said there, it sounds like as the sport's developing, you know, those kind of things are in place and that they're getting better and better. And if I think about football in this country in the 90s and before that, there was a huge drinking culture. You know, players get drunk during the week and then but still perform. It sounds like in lots of these stories, alcohol and other things are present. Do you see that changing because of how big the sport's getting? And is there anything in place, or are things changing?
I think it changed without a lot of people having to step in again because of the internet. People, you know, are seeing a lot of young people outside of skateboarding too. They're seeing people make a fool of themselves on these new social media apps, places, and a lot of young people are being much more careful. And people, you know, men and women and everyone in between are sharing their stories, and it's been a big help to the young skaters. To, you know, big warning signs, and now, yeah, that it is much more structured with a big huge thing like the Olympics. A lot of these young people that are getting into skating, there are a lot of people that still want to be street and they want to be raw and they want to be old school, and so there are some people that are gonna want to live that old sort of skate lifestyle, but there's a lot of new people around to give them helpful hints and let them know that, yeah, they shouldn't just totally party their life away. And I mean, I'm the first one to see these new young people and try to steer them in the right direction. So there's a lot more peers out there with a positive message and information than there used to be. So it's good to see. It's something.
Any other question? Oh wow, good luck, guys.
Hello, thank you all very much for sharing and saying such wonderful things and so on and so forth. I just wanted to ask I guess the skaters on the panel, Brian, Dave and Colin, maybe not just in relation to mental health and suicide, but in regards to anything else. Skating obviously tends to kind of draw big crowds or big groups of friends, so to speak. You go street skating, you're with anywhere between like 3 and 13 people maybe. If and when each of you had respective struggles and you felt that you wanted to tell someone about it finally, I wondered, maybe it was already covered in the film, but I wondered if it ever felt kind of taxing to kind of keep having to explain to someone that you were struggling or something of that caliber, and like, was there a point that it kind of stopped feeling like that and then it became a bit more open and easier to discuss? Yeah, that's kind of a big question, sorry.
I'll just go quick. So I gave up on skating. It never gave up on me, but I gave up on skating. I drifted. I took a sabbatical when I got really into like hardcore. My lifestyle went really, you know, I was really addicted to the chemicals, you know, alcohol, drugs, everything. For a number of years, I completely disconnected from the skate community and from skating. so it saved me back in the day when I really needed it, and I found skating. And then when I lost myself, I disconnected from the community and from skating. And then when I started to have a reconnection to what I can only describe as like my inner child, I was having like these moments of, I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but I was getting these moments of sort of like flashbacks to my childhood when it was like innocence, like the moments of innocence. I was like, oh my God, I want to recapture that skateboard. So my girlfriend at the time thought I was completely nuts to do that, to get a skateboard. Because she's like, you don't skate? I was like, no, I'm a skater, but I just don't skate because I just lost touch with it completely. So I reconnected to skating the moment I reconnected to myself. Like literally, it was in the exact same time. So I can't really answer your question like how you're putting it in that sense, but I can say, I think this is relevant, like now I am back sort of in a healthier mindset, you know, I've got my well-being back, should we say. It's quite interesting for me to be within a skate community or, you know, in situations where there are skaters, because I am very much that person who knows both sides of the coin. I mean, it's why I do what I do with my work. And it can be quite effective just to be there and just to, like, I think it was, not go around saving everyone, because it's not my job to go around saving everyone. But I can certainly be there to show people what it looks like to be stable, because I think we really need those pillars in life in general. So I feel like it's not my job, but it's I want to be of service, to just be, like, I do that in all pockets of life anyway. I don't even know if that answers your question.
Maybe it does, maybe. I'm happy with it, so.
You were asking about how it helps to talk a little bit, and
Yeah, I guess it was, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's all right.
Like having something that you feel that you need to say to people, like for you, like coming out. And, I would imagine that, I mean, as you said it in the film, it's quite freeing and
well, it was awesome. And for those of you that don't skate and those of you that do, those of you that don't skate, I rode for this company called Girl Skateboards, and it was kind of like in basketball, like the Chicago Bulls. I was so happy. And that really helped me to tell all my friends on that team. And Girl was like put on this pedestal, and there were no girls on the team. I'm not just saying that because I used to ride on a team, Toy Machine, that had Alyssa Steamer. She was incredible, still is. But when I came out to all them, it was so fun for me because they were my friends. They really loved me, and nobody had really told their story like that. And so it got really fun. It was awesome. I didn't feel so sad anymore in the van. And like a lot of skaters on tour before, we all had phones with screens with like tape porn up to the windows, and like they'd have your little station. So I could tape like big hairy firemen or bears or something. And my friends would be like, yes, dude. Like Ben Beale. Right. He was just so psyched and then we'd be driving down the street and he'd just point at some garbage man, you know. Right, look at that dude. And but I'm being a little funny, but that seriously felt so great, you know. And that's the truth. You know, I was able to share that stuff I couldn't share for so many years. And so there you go, you know, something that you're scared to say, and it was pretty scary at that time because nobody had really told the story like that, except for a lot of queer women were more the stories you would hear and see. So yeah, that once I broke the ice with my teammates in the van, they didn't tell anybody outside of that van, and it was great. I got to be myself, and I was so much happier on tour, and we all just kind of had fun with it. And so that was way before I told the world with a bigger story. But yeah, doing it in that van and having that support and them asking me, is it okay to like make this little joke? I'm like, yeah. So I was listening to you guys' shit for decades. So you're gonna hear me now, and it just became fun. So it was very healthy and very helpful.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
This is for Brian. Coming out, such a massive thing that you deal with. Did you find pressure to be a mentor to other people, and has that happened? Have a lot of people reached out to you?
I didn't feel pressure, but when my friend Giovanni, Retta, and Roger, who edited the Vice piece, when we put it out afterwards, I'm living in New York, and I would walk around, and people would come up to me, all kinds of people. I remember specifically this young man came up to me in the streets in Soho, and he's like, oh my God, thank you so much for doing what you did with your piece. My brother's gay. My parents were horrible to him, and watching that piece really helped me sit down and talk to my parents and say, this is my brother, this is your son. I won't stand for you treating my brother like this. Yeah, that would happen right after the piece came out in New York City. It would happen to me like 4 or 5 times a day. And it was great. I mean, I'm a pretty sensitive guy. I can kind of hold it together. I'm not embarrassed to cry, but people would be telling me, recounting stories of how it helped. And I'd be like, and then I'd go home and maybe cry for a little bit when I walked in my apartment and throw my stuff on the floor. But yeah, I didn't feel a lot of pressure to be a mentor per se. But people still come up all over. I was just in Portland, Oregon, in America, in this parking lot at a skateboard event, and lots of people were saying thank you and how it helped them. I just let them talk and listen to how. And then it's not just me. There are a lot of people in other parts of music and art and sports, I guess. Skateboarding to me. But so that's some of the way of the wake that came after that. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. San Francisco 49ers.
Believe it or not, I did the London Marathon last year, but I haven't run since. I'm a bit slow.
Hello. It's not really a question, it's more of just something to say to Brian at the front. It's just when you came out publicly a few years ago, I just wanted to say that I think it inspired probably quite a lot of young people and people who currently skated who weren't too confident to speak out on their sexuality and things like that. And I just wanted to thank you for just advancing our sport and just making sure there was a lot more people out there comfortable with what they could do and they could just go out and skate and just do what they wanted. So yeah, I'd just like to thank you for that. Thank you for your your confidence and your bravery. So.
That's an example right there. I'm not being funny. Thank you. And I really appreciate your encouragement and kind words and sincerity. Feels good.
Hi. I just had a question to you, Brian, or anyone this might relate to on the panel about how you felt when you sort of transitioned into sort of not drinking anymore in sort of social situations, because especially in the UK, and I'm sure everywhere around the world, there's such a big culture around drinking in social situations, and I think it's quite easy to feel pressured to drink and sort of rely on that to be to sort of be fun and to be social with people, and I think that's a lot in the skate scene as well, as we know. So just sort of your any advice or sort of any knowledge around what it was like for you when you were sort of first in those situations when you didn't sort of maybe have that sort of well, you weren't out with alcohol at that time.
For me, there would already be periods where I would take a break from drinking, and I think because in skateboarding so many people would see them go so far and get so screwed up that luckily a lot of the friends that I chose to keep near me and teammates were really understanding when someone was going down, and they were taking a break or they would get sober. I mean, we all saw so many friends go so dark and die that a lot of people started changing that, like, spirit there, that behavior where they'd be like, oh, come on, man. I mean, there's a small percentage in any culture that's going to always do that. Somebody's going to always want to say, hey, just have a fucking drink with me, or this, can we swear? Or, I mean, no, but, and then, I think it can be difficult at first to weed the people out that don't want to help you, and they're always going to be around. And I just started finding like some cans of soda with no sugar that I like, and that helps me in a social situation. It's really unique. Like you were saying, everyone's different. I just really wanted to stop, and I had all this momentum to build up. But yeah, I mean, just listen to other people's stories. Like for me, I can still go to a bar, but I don't last 4 hours. I last about 45 minutes, and I have a soda water and a lime, and I'm lucky. Everybody's unique, and I can be there for a bit, listen to people. When they start telling you something 4 times, 5 times, you're like, I'm out. But I think everybody's changing because there's so much different awareness than there used to be, and there's a lot more people that understand, and you can also even I'm cracking a lot of jokes, but for real, you can play with people like, say, yo, I'll drive you home, man. Like, chill. Like, I'll make sure everybody's okay. Like, you guys get screwed up, have fun. Like, I'll look out for, I don't know, you can just, listen to other people's stories, and the right people will have your back. The other people will just kind of drift away slowly. You might have to listen to them, be a little condescending or ignorant for a little bit at the bar, and just say later. I don't know, that's what I do.
Thank you.
Brian, did that feel like, I can only imagine it was an even more difficult time when you were trying to find your sobriety, and then you're isolated more sometimes from, being around the culture of drinking, whereas, you can't spend the same amount of time around people in a bar, environment. So did it almost have like a vicious cycle effect to it, or did you just find that was, I know you were adamant that was your path, but...
Excuse me. Well, I'm fortunate to have interest in taking photographs and other things. Also, I've been writing a lot ever since I stopped drinking, and so, even if you're not an artist and you can't do a portrait drawing, I find that this is a very helpful tip for people that may end up wanting to get sober. Writing is extremely helpful, and I also realized why I self-medicated with alcohol, because I have a very busy mind. I'm really creative. My attention span is quick. I have a hard time, sitting still. I always have been that way, and so writing has been a big help for me. And also it's an old thing that you can have letters that you never send. You can be angry, you can be happy at other people, and frustrated, and write it all down. You don't even have to, you don't, you can have that for yourself. And so I found that very helpful. And also exercise, just walking, getting air, and just getting out of the old situations that might trigger you. And when I was trying to quit smoking, I remember at one point, this is years ago, this is just a random tip. When I want a cigarette, I would go outside of the bar or pub, and I would not have one. I would go stand there and be like, because I'd be so irritated. I'd have like a nicotine fit, and I'd be talking to my friends, and I'd want a cigarette so bad, and I'd just go stand outside for like 10 minutes and kind of rock back and forth and be like, okay, you did it. Now try another hour. And you just, I don't know, you can create little things like that to help get creative. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing onto that question, or that sort of area? I think as well, if you're on the other side of the coin and you're that person that is drinking, and you've got someone around you or someone you don't know but you meet in a social situation, and I think London's really bad at this, but it's that typical thing. And when you meet someone, it's like, oh, what do you want to drink? And they actually say not a booze. They say, oh, I'll have a Diet Coke. Don't respond with that. Oh, why are you not drinking? So, and that was something that I learned about a month ago, and it's really stayed with me in social situations now. Of you don't really know what someone's going on in the background with their relationship with alcohol, but even just not putting that question back to them is something that I think we can all sort of be a bit better at, and that awareness. So, which is something that I learned that I thought I'd share. So, any other questions?
I just wondered if we could return to the compulsive bone breaking, but to ask you, but also to put it to the rest of the panel, whether you could speak to the idea of skateboarding as a form of ritualized self-harm. So skateboarding, not just the kind of cultural stuff around it, which leads to excess and the kind of self-harm associated with drinking and substance abuse, but the practice of skateboarding itself as being either an exhibition of self-harm or a way to control harm, through risk and other means.
I'll just quickly answer that. I mean, I want everyone else to chip in. It doesn't have to be. Like, you could say I'm just really bad at skating. But it's, I don't know, there's something in it that I just recognise because I have self-harmed in lots of other ways. But at the bottom of that, underlying my behaviour that I associate to it from my own experience is there was a big point in my time, a large proportion of my life where I didn't like myself much. So underlying the act of harming myself is I just don't like myself much. So if I'm going to harm myself, it's okay, So skating for me, I didn't set out to skate thinking I'm going to go and smash myself up. I just started skating, and I started to smash myself up, and I was like, this sort of, I don't know, it was on a subconscious level. But it wasn't until I learned about this stuff, like on a psychological level, I guess you could say, when I had more awareness over my behaviours, that I was like, it's kind of part of my self-harm, no different to my addiction or whatever else I was using. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, I that was not my personal experience of skateboarding. I was trying to avoid, but I've seen it for sure, 100%. There's a lot of people that are in that manic state, almost obsessive state, where they're really, whether they try to achieve something, trick or whatever. But I've seen it where they might be in almost in a sort of trance manic state where they really like, and you just see them going down and going down and going down. And there's you could probably do quite some research on it, I think, if you went into it. But I've seen it for sure. Yeah, and I know what you see, and you can't understand what's going through their mind. Like, how can you do this? How can you do this 30 times over? And it's fascinating and intimidating as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's probably a few things there. I don't think that there's anything about skating particularly that makes it a form of ritualized self-harm, but I think there's probably a couple of things. I think one of those things is that a lot of self-harm is about needing to feel something, and the pain can be grounding and can remind us that we're here and that we're real, and kind of remove you from a kind of dissociated state, or it can be quite a grounding thing. So I think there's something about pain that a lot of us can relate to, and it's difficult to know why that is something that is in some way comforting, and it's kind of reminding that you're here and you're real. And like I run long distances, and I could not quite explain to you why I might be collapsing, or I was sort of telling some friends about how I was literally collapsing at the end of an ultra marathon, and was a bit worried that I wasn't going to be able to get home because I was so cold and so ill and in such a weird state, and like I was kind of off my face and in a world of pain. And they look at me like, why the fuck do you do this to yourself? And I'm like, because it's really good fun. Why is it fun? I don't know. I can't explain why it's fun. I can't explain why punishing my body to that degree gives me such a high. But you know, it does. I'm not addicted to alcohol or drugs, but you know, but I also know the enjoyment of, you know, of mind-altering substances. So I think that there's something about pain which is very difficult to put into words. But I think a lot of us, it doesn't have to be setting out to I am going to harm myself, but there's something very sort of grounding about pain, and lots of us use it in different ways which we wouldn't necessarily associate with self-harm. And there's also something that can be a factor in self-harm, is that it can be a form of self-care. And quite a lot of the time, people who self-harm by sort of ways that we're perhaps more familiar with, like cutting, will talk about how part of the ritual is actually caring for themselves afterwards, you know, kind of dressing their wounds, looking after themselves, perhaps seeking care from other people. And there's a real dismissive thing sometimes about like self-harm as attention seeking, you know, like there's something wrong with attention seeking, like we don't all seek attention in some ways. So I think there can be that aspect in it, again, not for everybody, but sometimes the ritual around healing from harm and pain can be really important. And it's, yeah, I don't think that it's, again, I keep coming back to it, everybody's different, but I think there's quite a lot of different things in there. And if you start digging down into it, there's a whole world of stuff around pain and harming ourselves and the weird shit that we do as human beings. I think we could all kind of think about our own behaviours and things that we do, whether that's through skating or whatever else, that, you know, can throw up some really interesting questions about our own relationship with pain and harm.
Thank you. That was a great question.
Thank you for your generous answers.